We're going to adhere to the Supreme Court and continue to do our work in accordance to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court
So which
made a
ones are
ruling.
you going to repeal?
The Supreme Court didn't tell us to repeal anything.
They have been deemed unconstitutional.
No.
Absolutely, they have. This was a huge victory.
The House Committee on Oversight held a hearing focusing on the activities of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Lauren Boebert questioned EPA Administrator Michael Regan about the agency's regulatory actions. She attempted to criticize the EPA's involvement with Chevron, incorrectly implying that Chevron acts under EPA's directives. Boebert should have known that Chevron operates as an independent company, not under the EPA's control. Her misunderstanding led to several inaccuracies during her line of questioning, highlighting a lack of clarity on the distinct roles of the EPA and private corporations like Chevron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Regan, is it true that the EPA has never obtained formal authorization legislation from Congress?
I'm sorry?
Is it true that the EPA has never obtained formal legislation, authoritation legislation from Congress? It's never been authorized by Congress.
EPA is not authorized by Congress?
I'm asking you.
I thought EPA was authorized by Congress.
Well, the EPA is not. The EPA has never been formally authorized by Congress. However, this agency has imposed over $1.3 trillion in regulatory costs since the Biden regime took office. We authorize committees here in Congress to ensure that we have proper oversight and accountability in the functioning of the executive branch. And this process is extremely vital because often we see agencies abuse the separation of powers, creating rules and laws, regulations without consent of Congress. And we appropriate funds to agencies like the EPA and expect these tax dollars and this tax dollar funding to be used in accordance with the legislative priorities and comply with the oversight requirements. So, Mr. Regan, last month, the Supreme Court rightly overturned the Chevron doctrine, which the EPA relied on to support its very controversial and costly rulemakings. Since your agency has never been authorized by Congress and has since lost most legal standing, does your agency still plan to enable rogue bureaucrats to enact unconstitutional regulations?
I'm not quite sure I follow you. You're saying that...
I'm saying the Chevron doctrine was overturned by the Supreme Court.
We have no authority?
I'm saying you've never been authorized. Wait, hold on.
Congress doesn't delegate authority for us to do the regulations and the business and the policy. So since 1970...
So the Chevron doctrine, where you have created all of these rules under that have been proven to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court has been overruled. So now I'm asking, are your bureaucrats still going to implement these rulemaking processes?
You do know Chevron is not just focused on EPA. So,
but you are. So I'm asking about the EPA, and I'm asking about your rogue bureaucrats that have enacted these unconstitutional regulations. Are you going to repeal them? Are you going to continue to implement them, or are you going to stop altogether, since it's been overturned?
Do you understand the ruling?
Do you understand the ruling of the Supreme Court?
I do, and so your question is ill-formed. No,
will you be repealing?
We're not going to stop.
So you're going to unconstitutionally continue with these
rulemakings. We're going to adhere to the Supreme Court and continue to do our...
So which rulemakings are you going to roll back?
We're going to adhere to the Supreme Court and continue to do our work in accordance to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court
So which ones are you going to repeal?
The Supreme Court didn't tell us to repeal anything.
They have been deemed unconstitutional.
No.
Absolutely, they have. This was a huge victory. And, even in our appropriations bill in the House this year, the funding has been reduced by 20%. I would argue that it needs to be reduced by 100%. But in this, it's because of these radical Green New Deal policies that jeopardize domestic energy development and overload America's power grid and raise costs on American consumers and businesses. So with the EPA and these overreaching regulations, do you have any intent on working with the House majority to lower energy costs and produce more reliable and affordable energy?
If you look at our rule, we are producing reliable, affordable, diverse.
I think America's Americans' wallets would disagree with that. I mean, the Biden administration, if they continue under Obama's administrative policies, this regulatory pace for a full 8 years, the cumulative costs of this administration's rulemakings would exceed $60,000 per household. And as you know, the Biden administration reversed President Trump's successful deregulation by executive order. So the Biden regime is on pace of increasing regulatory costs at a rate of $617 billion per year in just rulemaking that we are seeing is unconstitutional.
It's just shocking. You spend so much time with our regional staff and regional administration and Region 8 and have such productive conversations about how we're doing things for your district and your state, and then you take this microphone and you
I've also seen the coal plants that have been decommissioned in my state.
100% we should not
I've
exist.
seen the energy regulations that have regulated my district into poverty.
You're spending time with my staff.
So sure.
In your district.
Of course I am. I have oversight over your staff, and I want them to answer. I want them to provide a service for the American people.
Complimenting them
but there
about
are
the
so much.
partnerships.
Yes, there are some things that have been done well, but not
we should be
everything.
100%
When we have $617 billion per year in rulemaking, that is absolutely absurd. When you are taking our affordable, clean energy and regulating it out of existence and killing these good-paying jobs in my district, yes, I have a problem with that.
Sure. Yeah.
My time has expired, and I yield.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think that was 46 seconds over, so we'll take that. Thank you.
Mr. Raskin, if we're going to start timing people over, then you're going to have to start editing your comments on your opening statements and everything else. But I will do that.
Thank you, kindly.
All right. Chair recognizes Mr. Goldman from New York.
Wow. Mr. Regan, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I would just like to clarify a few things for my colleague from Colorado. The Loper-Bright ruling, as you know, said that the courts should not defer to agency rulemaking if a statute is ambiguous, and instead the courts get to determine whether or not what the statute means. Is that your understanding as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that would not require any regulations to be reversed or overturned, correct?
Correct.
But I do want to talk about that case because it is an incredible power grab for the judiciary. And I want to go through a couple things with you. I'm going to take as one example a recent rule that the EPA implemented and finalized in March, the greenhouse gas emission standards for heavy-duty vehicles, which is, I think you've put it as a strongest national greenhouse gas standard for heavy-duty vehicles in history, and one that would have a significant impact on my district, one of the most densely populated districts in the country, where there's a lot of last-mile delivery facilities and operations that create a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases. Can you just very briefly, just for timing's sake, explain the process that the EPA goes through to, and what kind of expert analysis is used to and what kind of input is implemented to finalize a rule like this?
Well, you know, we have some of the world's best engineers and scientists who focus on these rules, and typically, especially in our Ann Arbor laboratory, or world-renowned laboratory, we invite in all of our stakeholders, all of the industry, the best manufacturers, the best engineers and scientists, and we go through simulations and really look at what would happen in the real world if we were to pursue some of these regulations. So we take our scientists, match them with the world's best scientists on the private sector side, and then we look at how we can build on the regulations that preceded the one that we're about to put in place. We also look at a cost-benefit analysis, and we look at penetration rates, we look at the market, and we best determine how can we put the best technology on the road that keeps this country globally competitive and also reduce the pollution that we're aiming for.
that is, thank you for the explanation. Quite a in-depth and detailed, lengthy process involving the world's greatest experts. In that room with the world's greatest experts and the EPA experts, are there any federal judges?
No.
So what the Supreme Court just did, am I correct, is say that the experts should not get any deference in how they implement the rulemaking process, but that the non-experts in the judiciary are the ones who get to do that. Is that your understanding?
Well, I'll be careful in commenting on this ruling, but what I can say is the experts that are in the room and myself and the CEOs that are in the room that are making these decisions, this new case seems to take that away from us and gives it to the court.
Exactly. A complete power grab that was led for many years, decades, by the Koch brothers, who have spent tens of millions of dollars in trying to overturn this Chevron doctrine in order to benefit their oil and gas and other industries that harm the environment. And you know what's interesting about this case, this Loper-Bright case, is that Clarence Thomas didn't recuse himself. He ruled on it. And yet Clarence Thomas took free private flights paid for by the Koch brothers, went to their events, raised money for them. This is all documented. And then after that, in 2020, Clarence Thomas just completely reversed his view of the Chevron doctrine. Funny, convenient. And yet he's ruling on this case. And what is going to happen is that this Trump Project 2025, just like Ms. Boebert said, is going to try to eliminate all environmental regulations. Donald Trump has offered to do that for the oil and gas company if their industry leaders can provide him with $1 billion to help in his campaign. But now that he has absolute immunity, if he becomes president, he can't get charged for that obvious criminal public corruption violation. And so he's going to try to implement Project 2025, eliminate the EPA, eliminate climate change from all regulations, eliminate the experts at the EPA and other agencies and put in his political lackeys, and then get to go to Clarence Thomas to determine whether or not what the executive agencies decided makes any sense. This is the destruction of our democracy. And I yield back.